Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. It's time once again for another sacred marriage segment, which means Lisa is here with me. Sweetheart, thank you so much for being my marriage partner and my partner on this segment.
I love you so.
I love you, sweetheart. And we're going to be looking to this week and the next time we do a sacred marriage at part of the sacred marriage vows. Today specifically, we're looking at what it means when we make this vow for in sickness and in health. I don't know if you remember this, sweetheart, but there's a well-known Christian television personality who has his own news program and has had it for a long time. And every now and again, he kind of puts his foot in his mouth. He's getting older. And he was once asked a question on this program about a fellow was married to someone who was coming down with Alzheimer's.
I think I know who we're talking about. I watched that episode.
Did you see it live?
You read it? Yeah. I was like, you read about the things I watch live.
Well, so he gets this question, hey, my wife's got Alzheimer's. Should I stay with her? Yeah. And
his response was daunting.
Horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, leave. This is a good time to leave.
Yeah, now's a good time to leave. You know, I mean, she's as good as dead, he basically said.
Well, the co-host with him was a little shocked. Her eyes were open, and she covered up for him because she probably thought he was having a moment.
Yeah, exactly.
A big moment.
A big bad moment. And yet the reality is that there are people who think in those terms. Yeah. And we want to make sure that we push back against that. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about what drives that? Where are people's heads when they're thinking, this is now my out, or this is now a legitimate reason for me to go?
I think it's a burden issue. I think the culture is really, in many ways, drives that ideology that if marriage is not really 50-50 or even 100-100, but as soon as I don't get what I want or you become a burden on my life, you need to be cut off from me, and I don't want that. And so I do think that's probably part of the culture-driven mindset, is that when marriage becomes a burden, when your spouse starts to deteriorate, you don't want the responsibility of walking those hard places. Yeah,
it sort of reveals, even if we don't think that or say that, it kind of reveals maybe how our heart is looking at our marriage. You know, you may not know this because I don't think, it's the last essay that C.S. Lewis ever wrote before he died. Is printed at the back of his collection of essays, God in the Dock. And it's called The Right to Happiness. And in it, he talks about a conversation he overheard where basically someone is justifying divorce on the grounds of their unhappiness in their marriage. And everybody was just sort of embracing this idea. Well, after all, we have a right to happiness. But when we make vows to stay with somebody, we don't have that in the fine print unless you become a burden, unless this doesn't make me happy. That's the whole point.
Check out all the appendages.
Yeah, the whole point is, hey, I'm sticking with you no matter what.
Right.
Now, sweetheart, you are more attuned, more trained, more knowledgeable on issues relating to health. And, do you, I don't know how to put this. Is it
common in my field to see people?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I remember when I was a director of dietetics, I had a patient named Lisa, and her husband was Kurt, and they'd come over when they were 16 from Germany. They'd been married 68 years.
Wow.
He was a very, very tender man, and he sat by her side holding her hand until her last breath. And he would come in my office and sit and tell me their stories and their life here and how it unfolded and all of the journey that they walked together and the commitment that he had. There were many people in that nursing home who had spouses that were there faithfully every day feeding them when they were aphasic, couldn't swallow their food, just sitting there talking to them. But I have seen people even in my own age bracket that have the mentality of selfishness, and marriage isn't really, even though they take the vow for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, it's really until you become a burden to me and somebody else looks more appealing.
There's a real sense in which the wedding vow in our day is not deemed something anybody's really taking seriously at all.
Right. I can check out as soon as I want to.
Yeah.
It's like a commitment with, it's just a sticky note you can rip off of something and throw away.
Well said. Yeah. This is not bound.
I did it, now I'm done.
Yeah, this is just stuck with some glue until it falls down.
It's not really how I want to live my life.
Yeah, and yet we dress up, we stand in front of all these people, we make these things, and really,
these are our witnesses.
I was going to say, see, great minds, dear.
Great minds.
That they're there to witness those vows. Well, go ahead. You want to say something?
Well, thinking about that, even though those are witnesses there, you have witnesses at baptisms, you have witnesses at baby dedications, how many people really come alongside your life in a hard time and say, I was one of those witnesses, I need to help your husband stay committed, or I need to help that wife remember that she doesn't throw in the towel because she's unhappy with X,
right?
Or your children being raised. I really think that although we do have those witnesses, they aren't necessarily coming in and really leading in the role of responsibility.
Right. Everybody's falling down on the job.
And we need to think about that, especially as a Christian society, Christian culture.
Yes.
If you're a part of that, in your church, in your city, in your community.
Well, in a sense, sweetheart, it's the very same kind of problem, because if I get involved, and you know that I have, and in fact right now I am, and you are too, to a degree. We've got some friends that are going through a hard time and trying to coach and give biblical counsel. When we don't keep our witness vow, it's because I will help you maintain your marriage and keep your vow. I promise, unless it gets awkward or you might get mad at me if I do. It's the same thing, the same selfish spirit that's at work there. Now, something I wanted to mention, I know we've talked about this on an earlier segment that I think relates to this, and that's that story. I assume it's just a story.
About the man.
Yes. And how, and this touches on my experience with you. I mean,
Am I getting lighter? Yay! Okay.
What I mean, sweetheart, is,
sorry.
as you know, and we've talked about this as well. When we were first married, I went through a long
health journey.
Yes,
a
long
crisis,
yes,
crisis journey.
And you were so sweet and so gentle and so kind and so attentive and so loving and such a blessing to me. I'm hoping. And let me finish. Just then later, more recently, you had a brief, though it stretches out, but serious health issue as well. And I had the opportunity to serve you in the same way. And I think both of us, on both sides of that equation, had both of the blessings. That is, your hardship elicits in me tenderness and sympathy. Your tenderness and sympathy towards me when I'm in hardship elicits out of me gratitude and joy.
Independence.
Yes.
You know.
Now, just slow down. And dependence, not independence.
Right. And dependence.
Yes.
Because you can trust your mate. And God puts you through those very crisis moments acutely and sometimes long term that you are proven you're faithful until the very end. And it isn't just showing up. It's being attentive. It's wiping your hair. It's, I remember when you had tubes coming out from 2 different surgeries, and I had to flush tubes, change tubes, and encourage you because you were discouraged because you weren't healing fast enough.
Yes.
You just had one thing after another thing, and thinking, you know what? I know how to do this. I enjoy caring for you.
Well, and I enjoy caring for you, and I enjoy being cared for.
And I enjoy when we're well. And we just live our life
that's true.
without having
it's not just in sickness and in sickness.
Yeah.
It's in sickness and in health. And that can be something that people drop off. A lot of... go ahead, sweetheart.
Well, I was just going to say, I think what we need to be mindful for is that our bodies are made to break down. We are living in a sinful world, a sinful condition, and our hair will gray, our teeth may fall out, we may lose our eyesight, our waistline may change, our body may encounter crisis after crisis.
We may go bald.
And you know what? This is part of the fall. This is part of sin. And I think as Christ followers, we need to embrace that even more. And not superimpose that if you're not healthy, it's all your fault. You did this to yourself. Mm-hmm. And you might.
There's some connection sometimes, yeah.
But I also think God has every one of your days ordained for you already. And He knows. That doesn't remove the responsibility that we have over our bodies to keep it healthy.
Right,
and to
be good
feed
stewards.
It, be a good steward of our health. But I do think we need to be mindful that our bodies are going to deteriorate over time.
They are. And, it reminds me of that old song, I'm happy to be stuck with you. You need to, when you're going in, whether you are like 16 years old, like this couple was from Germany when they first came together, or whether you are, say, I don't know, older like I was when I married you, we have to know this is where we're going. And we're going together.
Amen.
And, you and I have talked about, and really we've prayed about our desire, if God would be so pleased to allow us to go together, that, I'm having this...
That neither one of us would have to
live without the other one. Yes. And having this vision of us hopefully very
but now,
old.
I'm praying that I'm here when Jesus returns.
Yes, that'd be nicer still, yes.
However.
I want our listeners to, if nothing else, from listening to this conversation, to
change your mind.
Yeah, and go back and remember what you said, and make sure you sort of set that like an Ebenezer in your life. I've got to remember. I've got to do this. And again, those days may be coming a lot faster than you think.
That's right.
And so you need to be ready. You need to be prepared. And you need to embrace it again with joy. It's a privilege. One of the things, dear, when you're not well, and I get to serve you, and I love you from the tops of my head to the bottom of my feet, but I also know that I get to serve Jesus when I'm serving you. And so, again, set that, get that rooted in you, and be ready for these times. Or if you're in these times, do not lose heart, do not lose hope, continue through these times. And remember...
And if you have lost hope, turn around.
Yes.
Go back. Ask the Lord to give you the strength and the courage to face it and to stick with the marriage, to stick with that person, and wash their feet like Jesus did. And it will transform your life.
Amen. Thank you, sweetheart, for being with us. I look forward to the next time, and I love you now and into our old age.
Me too.
Luke was the writer of the Gospel of Luke as well as the book of Acts, and he was a world-class historian, in addition to being a physician. His Gospel, as we know, was written specifically for a Gentile audience, and more specifically, Theophilus. And we can expect or suggest that his source for most of his information was probably Peter himself, that Luke is as close as we would get to having a gospel from the Apostle Peter. But as a book written primarily to Gentiles, Luke carries with him a kind of two things. One, a genuine drama of redemption perspective throughout the gospel. That is, he is seeing and witnessing and writing about and celebrating the fact that while Adam and Eve's sin plunged the whole world into rebellion against God, that in this time, in the life and ministry of Jesus, the kingdom was breaking out of its Jewish particularity into the whole world. And secondly, related to that, not just from just the Jews and into the Gentiles, but really from those who were in positions of greater respect to those who were not. You will see in the Gospel of Luke a special emphasis on the despised and the downtrodden. Now, what's interesting is that some of those despised and downtrodden were actually people in positions of authority. We have this propensity, unfortunately, in the church in our day to have a sloppy shorthand that goes something like this. Anybody who believes anything with any vigor theologically, anyone who has any moral sense is going to be painted with the brush of being the Pharisee, whereas anybody who doesn't care about right and wrong and who has no moral sense or any theological insight is going to be presented as the white hat wearing victims of the Pharisees, when the reality is the defining quality of the Pharisee was precisely what defines people who want to paint other people as Pharisees. That is, the defining quality of the Pharisee is this idea that I'm good and they're bad. That the defining quality of the friends of Jesus was not, oh, I'm good instead of the Pharisees. Nor was it, oh, I'm bad and that's fine. But rather, it's I'm bad and I need to be rescued. I need Jesus to redeem me. And of course, we see Jesus doing just that. It even begins before Jesus is born. If you remember, Luke, of all the Gospels, has more of the information of the events that led up to and included the birth of Jesus, this very early part of the story. Luke covers better than others, and some suggest, in fact, that he also received a good bit of information from Mary herself. But whatever the case, we know this, that when the angel came and announced to Mary that she would give birth to the Messiah, her celebration of it included an acknowledgement of her humble status, and the angel's announcement included a reference to the fact that God was going to kind of turn things upside down, that he was going to exalt the lowly and bring down the lifted up. Well, that's, again, theme goes throughout the book of Luke. It is probably the most complete of the Gospels. It includes, I think, more of the parables than any of the other Gospels. It is, in one sense, completed in the book of Acts. You could argue that Acts is Luke part 2. Same writer, same story. The story of the gospel going out into the whole world. That the gospel is a global gospel, a gospel for all people, no matter what their social standing is, no matter what their ethnicity is, no matter what part of the world they are from. It is for all of us. Friends, I'd encourage you to take the time, if you're not in a regular Bible reading program, if you're not in a Bible through the year program, boy, they're ubiquitous these days. Lisa and I go together through the U version on our phones, and have done so for the last several years, reading along with Nikki Gumbel. So we would encourage you to do that. But again, if you're not in a position or ready to do that, take a good look at the Gospel of Luke. Now, I'm going to come and make the same point next week when I talk about the Gospel of John, that it's also a great introduction to the Word of God. But Luke is the historian. Luke is the one with the compassion and the zeal for those who are outside of God's covenant community, and who delights to see God's people being brought in from the four corners of the world. I imagine that Luke, I don't know what happens when we're in heaven, but I imagine Luke must have rejoiced when messengers of the gospel made it all the way west to the tippy top of the British Isles with the gospel, where my people lived in ignorance and foolishness. I'm grateful. Give a good read to the book of Luke. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.